Joining us now to react to President Biden's speech is Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas. Sir, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I just wonder, as you heard the president there talking about MAGA Republicans, MAGA extremism, do you think that he described it correctly?
Well, I think it was a political speech. It was a divisive speech, and that's not presidential. And I've said repeatedly that we should not be dwelling upon the last election. We need to be looking at the future and solving problems. And here the president comes out and he simply talks about the last election and the divisiveness and attacks a segment of America, and that's not unifying. In his speech, he said we should look at each other as Americans and not enemies, and yet he singled out a segment of Americans and said basically they're our enemy. I don't think it was a presidential speech. I don't think it'll be well received. It was divisive, and that's very troubling to me whenever you aren't addressing the serious issues from border security to inflation that he's responsible for and needs to provide answers for.
Are you worried about the future of democracy, or do you think there are not threats to it?
Well, I believe we're resilient people. And of course, we've got issues in the Republican Party that we've got to resolve and work through. That's what elections are about. But I remember back in the time when Jimmy Carter was president, and he gave what they called the malaise speech. He never mentioned that word, but he talked about the crisis of confidence in America. Well, he was derided for that speech. It became known as the malaise speech. I think this speech of President Biden will have a similar impact. It's going to be derided over time as the threat speech, as the divisive speech, and that's not a good look for America. I have a lot of confidence in where we're going and that we can overcome the challenges that we see today, but we need optimistic leaders that dwell upon the future and present answers and problem solving and not the past.
You say there are things as a party that you need to work through. How do you do that when you have a large fraction of your party believing in those lies about the election, that thing of the past that you say you don't want to focus on, but that is also defining the future and potentially another Donald Trump run that seems very likely?
Well, the Republican Party has a lot of different aspects to it. We've always had, Tea Party Republicans. We've had free enterprise Republicans. We've got different categories, and a leader has to bring all of those together. And so that disparate group of Republicans still has to be unified, and it takes leadership. And so when you're looking at election denying and things like that over the last election, let's just speak the truth. Let's speak it consistently, and let's address problems and keep our focus on the problems that we see on the other side, which is President Biden and his leadership and the direction of the left wing of the Democratic Party. And so that is what we have to focus on. And I just think whenever you look at the President of the United States, he needs to take a step above that. If he wants to make a political speech, okay, go out on the campaign trail. But if you want to make a presidential speech, let's unify our country more than divide it, as what we saw last night.
Former President Trump is, of course, flirting with this idea of running for president again, really giving everyone the impression that it's a when, not an if. Just yesterday, hours before his speech, he said he's considering full pardons for January 6 rioters if he's elected. He also said that he's helping some of them financially. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I'm not in the President Trump's bandwagon. I'm not on his team for re-election. Now, I do think it's important to bring all of his supporters together. But of course, you should not be talking about the last election and the issues of that, and just like the President Biden should not be talking about that. And so we got to move away from that. My response is to the President, let's talk about the issues of today and the future. America is a great country. We can unify ourselves, but we don't need the debates over what happened in 2020. And so that's my response to it. I think time's going to tell. And it's such a distraction
can I
what
ask
we're
you,
seeing
Governor,
down
then
in the search.
who in your party does that? Sorry to interrupt you. We just have limited time, and this is so important. Who in your party is the person to do that, to focus on the future, when the prevailing voice is the former president's, and that's not what he's focusing on with Republicans?
Well, I think you look at governors, first of all. Whenever you see Governor Doug Ducey from Arizona that speaks the truth, and you look at Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia, who won a great re-election in the primary contest, these are leaders that speak the truth and they win. And so, time will tell as to who arises. I hope I'm in the conversation on it as well. But, it's key that we understand that the Republican Party is a diverse party. Obviously, President Trump has a very magnified voice, but there's a lot of other voices. Let's see how this works out over time. Again, what I started to say, this is a distraction, what's happening in Mar-a-Lago. It is a serious issue, but this is playing into President Trump's hands whenever he is able to control the dialogue as to what's happening and becomes a victim. We've got to put that behind us as a country, solve the problem, let's protect our national interests, but this has got to end in a shorter period of time and not drag out. It's not helpful for our nation.
Governor Hutchinson, it's always great to have you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.